Holidays, happy holidays, happy holidays. What's going on? It's Brian Dawson checking in, Rockstar Radio, big business in the afternoon, home in the morning hustle. Today we're here for Triangle Empowered. I love talking about things that affect our community. That's what we do with Triangle Empowered. We talk about things that's disproportionately affecting our community and ways that we can solve some of these issues. I'm very excited about today's show for several reasons. I could go on and on. I've been knowing this gentleman since high school, very good friend of mine. I'm excited to say I know him. We could get into the basketball stuff, but we got some more serious issues. But I just want to make sure that I give this gentleman his proper credit. It's always good to interview people that you admire, but most importantly, the people that you know. So right now, joining me today is Deputy Secretary David Elliott for the North Carolina Department of Administration. David, how you doing and happy holidays?
Happy holidays. I am doing well. It is great to see you, and thank you for this opportunity to share with your listeners some important information about the holiday season and some things to look out for.
So let's get right down to it, David. We have a lot to cover, man. Some important information that could save people's lives and change the course of what's going on with them and their family structure. So let's talk about the holidays and what makes domestic violence and the holidays become such a volatile problem time.
Sure. Well, Brian, as you know, the holidays are it's a dichotomy. It's a really happy time. People are joyous, excited. You know, the weather's changing, looking forward to being with family. But it's also a time that causes folks to be anxious. Some folks, like myself, I'm experiencing the holiday season for the first time. I'm 54 years old, and this is the first time I'm experiencing the holidays without my mother. And so with that comes some anxiety. Because of COVID and other things, you have lots of people experiencing things for the first time this holiday season, financial trouble, loss of employment. And because of that, the anxiety level is higher than at other times of the season. Also, you have seasonal affective disorder. Science has told us that during the wintertime, there's less light hitting the retinas in our eyes. And so some people get depressed and anxious. You have all of those factors combining at the holidays, and you add into that alcohol, substance abuse, and it's a recipe for disaster when it comes to domestic violence. When stress levels are high and people are struggling, we find that there is an increase in domestic violence. And so this time of year is particularly troubling for those who are in homes where domestic violence is present. And it's just something we all need to be aware of.
Right. Now, there are a lot of people there that are in these situations, whether they're abusers or victims, and they're not even aware. So what are some of the signs that people need to look out for to know what type of situation they're in?
Well, there are lots of them. And one thing just people need to be aware of is just how prevalent it is. 1 in 4 people are expected to experience some sort of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And there are lots of different things to look for during the holiday season. One of the things that's really important for folks to remember is it's not just physical. When most people hear domestic violence, they're thinking of a black eye, a bloody nose, a busted lip. But often it's more subtle. There are things such as power and control, looking for family members who you haven't seen in a while, perhaps being controlled by their boyfriend or their husband. Sometimes it's subtle, someone hushing or having their intimate partner not speak, controlling them. Sometimes when family members visit their family, a loved one who's calling every 10 minutes to check in, to some it may think, oh, that person is just in love. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's someone who's jealous and in control. So looking for those control dynamics are really important. Also being aware sometimes when it's time to leave. If you see someone getting nervous, getting anxious when it's time to leave, or if they're not able to get away from their partner, sometimes those are signs that they're being controlled in a way that's unhealthy and could be a sign of domestic violence.
Yeah. So, of course, the holiday season, a lot of people are off work. You do have more time with your loved one, with your family. What are some of the places I think or suggestions you give for people to go get support? Like how can people contact people just to get advice to find out if they're in that type of situation, just to describe what's going on with them?
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of resources. One thing I do want to mention is how important it is to create a supportive environment so that someone will feel comfortable going to get help. Often it takes a survivor up to 7 times to attempt to leave before they successfully leave. And there's a whole host of factors that cause them to go back, including just security. It's important for survivors to know before they decide to go get help that it's important to get help from a professional who can help them develop a safety plan. It's well documented that when someone actually leaves their abuser, the lethality rate goes up, and actually the chance of them being killed goes up. So it's really important that if you want to help someone, you don't just tell them what you think is right. You need to get them in the hands of a professional who can develop a safety plan that involves where they work, where they go to church, a variety of things that the average person would not think about. And so the first thing is just to create that environment where someone feels safe and comfortable to leave. And when they decide to leave, there are all sorts of resources that can be helpful. Our website, if someone were to search for that, they can NC Department of Administration .com has some great information, but if they search for NCDB directory in Google, NCDB directory, what they will see is an interactive website that will allow them to locate DV, sexual assault, and human trafficking shelters in their county. Those are places where they can go and they can find a professional who can help them develop a safety plan so that if they decide to leave, they can do it safely.
Right. And Dave, you brought up something interesting because you used the word love. A lot of times people don't understand that they're in these type of situations. You said a phrase that I thought was very important. I think you said intimate partner violence. Yes. Talk about what that means.
Sure. Well, and that's a great question because domestic violence or intimate partner violence can happen between any partners or folks living together, same-sex couples. It's usually violence and control that happens within a domicile or a home where someone lives. And because of that intimacy, there's so many factors that go into whether or not someone feels comfortable leaving. And those same factors can be used to manipulate someone into staying. For instance, if there are children in the home, often the person being abused fears for the safety of the children. They don't want to leave for fear of what would happen to the children. They may not leave for financial reasons. A lot of people don't leave because they love their partner. They're in love. They just want the violence to stop. And what's important to mention here is there are domestic violence intervention programs so that abusers can go and get help. Often this pathology of abuse is generational. So many folks in our community are used to domestic violence. It's as Sharnessa Ridley, our deputy director, says, it's almost a rite of passage. Everyone almost knows of someone or has been through it. And so it's a pathology that can be broken. So it's important for men and women, it's often men, to go seek help to learn how to handle themselves in situations so that violence is not the answer. But back on the point of the intimate partner violence, that is often manipulated where the abuser makes the survivor feel like they're at fault, like they're to blame or that they deserve this sort of abuse. They also use isolation and other things. I love you so much, I don't want you to be around your family members, to separate them so that when it's time to leave, they have nowhere to go. They've isolated all of their family members. Another thing, just I'll mention real quickly, that sometimes makes it hard during the holidays for someone to leave, it's the holidays. If you have children, you're on social media, you see everyone else sort of curating this perfect image of what their life is like. And sometimes that makes it harder for survivors to want to upset this family or societal expectations. And so great question about that intimate partner, because it's usually involving family dynamics, which makes people reticent to want to pay attention or to speak up or to get involved, because we often say, well, that's family business, don't get involved. And that's often one of the worst responses you can have. It's really important to ask questions and to not judge the person who's being abused, because that will most likely make them stay in that situation.
You're inside a special edition of Triangle Empowered. I'm with Deputy Secretary David Elliott, North Carolina Department of Administration. You're saying some really good stuff, man, and I'm really going back to words that's really kind of triggering questions and thoughts. But let me go back to that anxiety conversation that you had over the holidays. Does statistics show that it's more reported or increased reporting during the holidays?
Well, yes and no. As far as the reporting of domestic violence during the holidays, there are some reports that it increases during the holidays. What's tricky about that, Brother Brian, is that it's almost like, I love to fish, and the fact that after a tournament nobody's caught any fish doesn't mean the fish aren't there. It just means nobody's caught them. Domestic violence during the holidays is the same way. The fact that it's not reported does not mean that it's not happening. What we know is those stress factors, the anxiety, the family dynamics, all of those things increase the likelihood that it will happen. sometimes it also decreases the likelihood that it will be reported because people feel as if they don't want to ruin the holidays, right? They don't want the abuser's family mad at them at the holidays. They don't want the abuser to go to jail during the holidays. So there are a lot of social factors that sometimes impact the reporting. We know that the reporting of domestic violence overall, it's underreported. People do not report it for a variety of reasons, but we know that the circumstances make it more likely that it's occurring during the holidays, especially this year, after a year of and a half of COVID, where many families have not seen each other in a long time. There's added pressure from lack of employment to loss of loved ones, societal pressure. The pandemic is still going on. Some people are vaccinated, some aren't. And so I do think the reporting goes up, but separate and apart from the reporting, we know that the incidence of domestic violence increased during the holiday season. In winter months, people are inside more. They have more interactions, and so there are more opportunities for domestic violence to occur.
Couple more quick questions. Let's talk directly to parents that are in situations of child abuse. What advice can you give parents to keep this from happening, or if the situation is going on?
Sure, great question. With respect to child abuse, that is such a great question because almost every situation where there are children in a home and domestic violence is taking place, the children are being abused because they're witnessing this violence, they're witnessing this trauma. There are studies that show that if they measure stress hormone in the urine of children in domestic violence homes, they are more stressed out on whole than other children, and that makes sense. And so being aware that domestic violence doesn't just impact adults, it impacts children, that factors into the decision sometimes whether or not someone wants to leave. But also, if you're the parent of an adult child and you suspect, or even teenagers, that domestic violence is taking place, one of the most important things you can do is to talk to the person, make them feel safe. Do not judge them or judge their decisions, because that will often keep them from coming forward with information that you could use to help them. Create a safe place. Do not judge them. Learn what you can. If the domestic violence is taking place at the moment, call 911. Bring in law enforcement. I have been to far too many domestic violence homicide ceremonies where there are cutouts of all the women, some men, and children who've been killed because of domestic violence in the home. So this is really serious. If something's happening, call 911. If you know it's happening in the background and you're able to create an environment where someone can talk to you and build that trust, you can help direct them to some of the resources that could help them actually build a safety plan and get to safety. There are several hotlines that people can call. There's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Give them that again. Give them that hotline one more time.
Sure. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. You also have the National Sexual Assault Hotline, because sexual assault happens on a regular basis, unfortunately, and that number is 1-800-656-4673. That's the National Sexual Assault Hotline. And then human trafficking, we haven't really talked about that much, but North Carolina, unfortunately, because of where we're located on 95, the professional sports teams, and a variety of other factors, has a real problem with human trafficking. And if you suspect human trafficking is taking place, or you're a victim of human trafficking, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-888-373-7888.
Wow. So, David, of course, as you know, Thanksgiving is the beginning of our longest national holiday season, which lasts, now through the top of the year. So we have to really get you back. I'm going to request you back so we can talk about this leading up to Christmas, because anxiety only increases in this time of year because of things people are going through. So one last piece of advice that you can give our listeners about intimate partner violence, child abuse, national trafficking, anything that you can tell us, and also give us the key information in terms of numbers and hotline info.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, anxiety. If folks just take the time to take care of themselves, right? It's critical that folks practice mindfulness, prayer, exercise, eat right, do the things that you have to do to take care of your mental state. If you see someone who's struggling, help them do the same. And as it relates to domestic violence, just be there. Listen, there's never been a better time around the holiday season to ask people how they're doing, right? With COVID and the pandemic, abusers sometimes are listening to see if you're trying to make an end or to break that barrier that they've set up. But you have the perfect excuse. Ask about COVID. How are you coping? How are the kids coping? How is homeschool doing? And then really listen to the answers and listen for cues and clues that can indicate that maybe they can't talk to you right there because their spouse is there. One unknown fact is a large percentage of women who are admitted to emergency rooms in hospitals are there because of domestic violence. And one of the few times that they're able to be free from their abuser is when they go to the restroom. And so years ago, we had an initiative that put things actually in the restrooms because that was one of the few times that folks were free to speak. So remember that as you're listening and talking to family members during the holidays, they may not be able to signal a whole lot to you if the abuser is present. Get them off to the side, talk to them, and just check on, not just for domestic violence, check on those folks who you know are lonely. This is a tough time for a lot of people. Hopefully we can get involved and help save lives this holiday season, and we can make it a more joyous and happy time for everyone. But there are a lot of people suffering, and thanks to you and to the station for your work, not only for this piece, but for all the work you've done with the Department of Administration, our Secretary Pam Cashwell and Governor Cooper. We thank you for your partnership in helping to end intimate partner violence.
No, it's great, Dave. And I tell you, man, I've been on the radio 21 years. I don't want to date me and you at the same time, but people often wonder why I've been so successful at my job. And getting a job at a radio station where I've been ingrained into the community has been important. And having resources and knowing people like you is what really makes me special here. So I know the kind of guy you are. I know what type of athlete you are, or at least was. Let me make sure we get that straight. But I know you're pouring the same energy and effort into this by the resources that y'all are doing, through the North Carolina Department of Administration. So thank you guys for doing this. Remember, and it only takes us to, really affect that one person, and it makes our efforts worthwhile, man. So thank you for being on the show today, Dave. I kept you a little longer, but I knew that we would have some very interesting discourse. And you got to promise me we would do this again this holiday season.
All you have to do is ask. I'll be there.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. It's great seeing you. Take care.
No doubt. I hope you enjoyed Triangle Empower. Make sure you check out David and his group and what they're doing. If you got any information, you can always jump on our website, hiphopnc.com. Thanks again, David. Happy holidays. Blessings.
Happy holidays.